Hey, it's Plumber Tom. Don't forget to check in the comments below for a link where you can find additional resources like practice tests and courses that you can take. Your support helps me to be able to create more great content. Thanks for watching. Hello, welcome to this presentation of the International Fuel Gas Code, Chapter 4. My name is Thomas, and in this presentation, we're going to look at one section. It's section 404. It's kind of a long one because it's all about piping system installation. We're going to look at a lot of requirements about the way that we should install gas piping. So, get out your books. Let's get to it. Here we are, section 404. This is about piping system installation. 404.1 talks about the installation of materials. We're going to install pipe for the piping system. But this is an important point. Materials used shall be installed in strict accordance with standards under which the materials are accepted and approved. What does that mean? Listen. We are dealing with a flammable, explosive gas. When we install pipe systems that are going to contain that gas, we need to make sure we do it right. That's what it's saying. That's why it uses the word strict accordance. This isn't something that you can do casually. There aren't corners that you can cut without having serious and disastrous consequences. So this section is going to be really important to understanding what we need to do this right to keep us safe. 404.2 talks about CSST. CSST is corrugated stainless steel tubing, and it says these piping systems shall be installed in accordance with the terms of their approval, the conditions of the listing, and the manufacturer's instructions, and this code. We're putting all these angles on it, but we have to make sure it's installed correctly. Now, just because you know how to install one type of CSST from a certain manufacturer doesn't mean you know how to install them all. They do have different fittings, different connections, different methods for installation. So if you're installing CSST, you need to make sure that you understand that system. Ideally, you've been trained and certified on the installation of that system, and then you know and can go forward with confidence that you're going to do it right. 404.3 talks about prohibited locations. There are places within a building that we should never run gas pipe. What parts of a building do you think gas pipes should not be installed in? Well, let's think about this. Let's see, where should I not run a gas pipe? Anywhere within the building that air can be moved and transferred throughout the building would create a pretty dangerous place if there was a leak, right? The leak gets out, it starts getting pushed through the building, and then we have a huge problem. That's why we see this. Gas pipe is prohibited from being installed in ductwork. That's supply, return, exhaust, closed chutes, chimneys, gas vents, dumbwaiters, and elevator shafts. These are all places that we would not want gas leaks. You never want a gas leak, but this would make it worse. Example slide of prohibited location. Here's a pipe passing through an air supply. This is definitely not what we want to do. What about piping in solid walls? Let's say we're dealing with a commercial building and they're putting up cinder block walls. They're going to fill that with grout. What about that? Piping in solid partitions and walls, it says, concealed piping shall not be located in partitions and solid walls unless installed in a chase or casing. It can't be just directly installed, grouted in, buried in a concrete wall. So a chase is like an open space that we can even get to if we need to. And casing is a protective space around the pipe. 404.5, piping in concealed locations. Here's the question. Is it okay for you to have pipes in a wall, buried in a ceiling? Yeah. It says fittings in concealed locations are going to be limited to the following. So if I'm going to run pipe through structure, through joists, through trusses, through walls, and that's going to get covered up later, some fittings are allowed to be used and some are not. The ones that are allowed to be used include threaded elbows, T's, and couplings. You can also use brazed fittings, welded fittings, and some that fit these other standards listed in this section. May I point out that that excludes unions. You're not allowed to put unions into the pipe system where it's going to get buried, because a union is a potential leak point. It could come loose and start to leak. 404.6 talks about running that gas pipe into the building. We've got to get gas into the building. Water lines, sewer, we just go below. We can come through the dirt, through the side, or underneath, no problem. But gas is different. All building penetrations have to be above ground. That's why we see this over and over. Every time a gas system is installed, the gas pipe is run up next to the building. It comes out of the ground. You'll see a regulator, a meter, and then it goes into the building where it feeds the system and the appliances. 404.7 talks about protection against physical damage. This is the same as any type of piping that we're going to install that could be damaged if a sheetrock screw or nail is put right through the side of the pipe. So what do? We nail plate, or we protect that. Now in the International Fuel Gas Code here, it says anything that's within 1.5 inches from the frame member face. So from the face of the stud in, if that pipe is within 1.5 inches, then it needs a nail plate. We also need to make sure it's protected 4 inches to each side, 4 inches from the top and bottom plates. And there is an exception here on protection depending on the type of pipe. Here's where we flip right around, because it says steel pipe does not need protection. If you're running black steel pipe throughout the building, you don't have to nail plate, because the chances of them running a sheetrock screw through Schedule 40 steel pipe is not very good. So running that sort of pipe is okay. But what about the other? If I'm doing CSST and pulling flexible gas pipe through the building, yeah, that's dangerous if it gets hit. So, we're going to have to pay attention to what type of pipe or tubing is being installed and then consider these protections. Now, as we're trying to get the pipe through the building, obviously we put it in walls, ceilings, things like that. But what if it just really needs to go in the floor to get from here to there in an industrial application or a commercial building? Well, it can be laid in the floor. There's a few options. One of them is that it can be laid down in a channel. So you actually have a cement channel that is going to hold that pipe. And then you put a removable cover over the top of that. This would allow access to the pipe later if we need to take care of a leak or if we have a problem. We can see how careful we are about putting gas pipe below ground. Now, why is that? Why is it a problem if you have a gas leak below ground? Natural gas is lighter than air, and it's going to try and come up into the building. And if there's a leak below ground, it's going to be really, really hard to correct that problem. Because how do you even find it? And once you do, we're pretty invasive by the time we get that leak fixed. So, putting it in a channel is one way, but that's not to say you can't bury it. Now, we talked about earlier, it shouldn't be coming in the side underground. Penetration should come above ground. But there is this exception in 404.8.1 where it talks about conduit with one end terminating outdoors. Now, this would be for a flexible gas pipe. We're able to just push it through the conduit and get it into where it needs to be. Now, in this particular situation, if there's a conduit that goes from outside the building and comes in through the cement slab, on the outside, it has to have a vent coming off of the top with an insect screen. What's the vent for? Well, if there's a leak down there, that gives the natural gas somewhere to go. It comes out and it's going to be outside. That's a safer location than inside. And also, you're going to smell it. If you're outside and you walk by and you're like, I smell gas here, there's a problem. And then you can address that, right? On the inside, it has to be sealed. That conduit would come 2 inches above that concrete floor and then sealed up around the pipe so that if there's a leak, once again, the gas isn't going to come in the building. Now it's going to go outside the vent. One other scenario here, 404.8.2, conduit with both ends terminating indoors. We talked earlier about creating a little channel that you could just put a removable cover, but you do have the option of running a conduit below the floor or through the floor and having it go down in and come up within the same building. Okay, what are the rules for this one? This time, we're not going to seal it up because if there's a leak below there, we need to know that. So we'd want to be able to smell it on one end or the other. It does have to come at least 2 inches above the concrete floor with the conduit, and then that flexible gas pipe can be pushed through the conduit from one end to another. Now, what does that leave us? If there's a leak, we're going to smell it on one end or the other. And if that's a problem, we can take that pipe out and push a new one through the conduit. I mean, that's possible. So that's why it is done in this way. Many times, gas pipe is installed on the roof. Bigger buildings, industrial or commercial buildings, are going to have rooftop units, air handlers, where it's going to be producing heat and pushing that down into the building from on top. In which case, it's very convenient to just run that gas pipe all over the roof, and that's fine. But if you do that, then you also have to keep that gas pipe elevated above the rooftop, and the code says that has to be at least 3.5 inches above the roof surface. There's a variety of ways you can do that. This installation included roller mounts where the expansion and contraction of that pipe can happen, and it's just going to stay supported whatever happens out there. But that's the rule, 3.5 inches above the roof surface. 404.10 talks about isolation. This is dealing with transferring gas from an LP storage tank into the building. We might be using dissimilar metals. Say we're using copper here and then steel there. We have to make sure that those are isolated with the proper dielectric unions. 404.11 talks about protecting those pipes against corrosion. Any type of pipe can be corroded, especially when it's buried in soil. So we're talking about protecting that. It states that galvanized steel is not considered protection enough because that could still rust out. So there are protections that need to take place underground. That would include a corrosion-resistant material, factory-applied, electrically insulated coating, things like that that can really protect that pipe below ground. Once again, dissimilar metals have to be protected against electrolysis and use the proper insulating fittings. Here is one of the standards that really, as a plumber, you should have memorized. This one is widely applicable. 404.12 is minimum burial depth. Please lock this number in your mind. You need to remember that the pipe has to be at least 12 inches below surface when you are burying gas pipe. Can you go deeper? Sure. Can you go less than that? No. The only exception given is that for individual outdoor appliances, so you have a patio, some lighting, and a little fireplace or something, those can be buried at 8 inches, but they have to be protected against physical damage. As with any piping that is installed below ground, when we have that trench open and we lay the pipe in it, we have to make sure that it's properly supported. So this 404.13 states that the trench shall be graded so that the pipe is firm and substantially and continuously bearing on the bottom of the trench. 404.14 talks about piping underneath buildings. We talk about running pipe below ground, but can you run a gas line right under a building? The answer is no. Running a pipe below a building is prohibited other than the exceptions we've talked about earlier where it's encased in a conduit. What if we have an outlet, a connection point to the gas system, but it's not going to be used right now? Let's say a connection for a patio grill or a gas range, but we don't have a connection. 404.15 gives us an important safety measure, which is that any of those outlets that are not being used should be capped gas tight. If we put a valve on there, this is particularly dangerous. You have a valve on there. If you don't plug it or cap it, then someone could come along, open it up, and just let that gas flow. And then we have a hazard, right? So we plug it, we cap it, we make sure whatever we're doing those outlets are covered and gas tight. 404.16 talks about location of outlets. That means places where the gas pipe is going to be accessible and we can hook up an appliance. If it's coming through the floor, code states that it has to be 2 inches above the floor surface where we can thread on and connect to that. If it's coming through a wall, code says that has to be 1 inch from the wall surface. And if it's coming from the ceiling, also 1 inch from the ceiling. That gives us enough to get our tools on there, to be able to thread a gas valve or fittings on there to make connections. 404.17 brings us to the topic of plastic pipe. Where can plastic pipe be run? Definitely not inside the building. Please, never run flexible gas pipe inside the building. It is for underground outdoor use only. As mentioned before, even though you can run plastic pipe below ground, you cannot run it underneath the building. The maximum pressure for gas pipe should be 100 psi for natural gas or max pressure of 30 psi for LP. That's going to be what that pipe needs to be able to handle. Most systems aren't going to be up quite to that level. When gas pipe is buried underground, particularly plastic pipe, we need to bury it with a tracer wire. That way we can find it quickly and know exactly where it is so that we're not going to dig it up and cause serious problems. It has to be a yellow insulated copper wire. Access has to be provided on the ends so that we can attach equipment and find that line, trace it out. Those access points have to terminate above ground. Now the wire specifically has to be 18 gauge and suitable for direct burial. Now as plumbers, we may not know a whole lot about wires, but please know that there's a lot of different types of wires out there that are used for electricity. Some are okay to bury below ground and some are not. And that's why these are specifically going to need to be direct burial tracer wires. 404.18 brings us to pipe debris removal. In the process of installing pipe, it can have dust, dirt, burrs, threading, scraps, all kinds of things could be inside that pipe. We don't really want that to push right into the appliance. So we'll talk about purging later, but it's important to clear the lines. And if you're going to clear it, it says, please don't clear it out using gas. Don't open it up and just let gas flow and hope we're going to get all the dust out. Do that with air first. Push that through. Clear it out before we put in the gas. There are some devices that are prohibited in the gas system. This section 404.19 says specifically fittings that will reduce the cross-sectional area. There's other things that are not approved. Just make sure that whatever's being installed is an approved pipe or fitting for that system. 404.20 talks about testing of the pipe and says it shall be tested before it is put into service. So we're never going to take that chance of a leak by just putting gas in, turning it on, and leaving this system. We're going to have to make sure it's tested, inspected, and then we can be confident that our system is not going to be dangerous. All right, this concludes this presentation of the International Fuel Gas Code, section 404. We've talked about a lot of different things in this section that apply to the installation of gas piping. Keep these in mind as you are out there in the field installing gas pipe. Join me in the next presentation. We'll pick it up in 405. I'll see you there.